The overhead lights in operating room 6 cast a cold, sterile glow over the table where young Lucas Grant, just 12 years old, lay unconscious beneath a surgical drape. Beeps from machines echoed steadily like a digital heartbeat, a rhythm the team had grown used to. It was supposed to be a routine spinal decompression, at least as routine as spinal surgery on a paralyzed child could ever be. Dr. Ethan Mallory, chief neurosurgeon, stood at the head of the table, scalpel in hand, his brow furrowed beneath his magnifying visor. A legend in his field, Mallory was the kind of surgeon who didn't flinch, didn't stutter, didn't freeze, until now. Steady retractors, he instructed the scrub nurse, his voice cool and clipped. Suction ready. Anesthesiologist Dr. Klein monitored the vitals closely, heart rate stable, blood pressure optimal. Lucas had been fully sedated and immobilized. There was no reason, no possibility for voluntary movement. And then it happened. At first, it was subtle, so subtle that Dr. Mallory thought he imagined it. Faint twitch. His scalpel hovered inches above the exposed spinal column when he noticed it again. "Did you see that?" he asked, his voice a notch tighter. The nurse glanced up. "What, Dr. Mallory?" "His leg. The left one. It moved." Everyone paused. Even the machines seemed to hesitate. "That's not pos," Dr. Klein began, but then both of Lucas's legs jolted, a full, unmistakable spasm. The surgical assistant gasped, nearly dropping her clamp. "He's paralyzed. How did?" Before anyone could answer, Lucas's lips began to move. His eyes fluttered beneath the anesthesia, still tightly shut, but his mouth parted. "Vitals still in the green," Dr. Klein reported, now audibly nervous. "He's not waking up." Then came the whisper, soft, raspy, barely audible, but chilling. "No light aperior ionuum." The room froze. The suction tube hissed in the silence. The nurse looked up, pale. "What did he just say?" someone asked, voice trembling. Mallory stepped back from the table, gloves trembling slightly, his breathing shallow. He looked down at the boy, unconscious still, but with goosebumps rippling across his skin. He turned to Klein. "Translate that." Dr. Klein hesitated, then pulled out his phone with a shaking hand. He typed quickly and swallowed. "It's Latin. It means, 'Do not open the door.'" The surgical lights flickered just once, but it was enough to turn adrenaline into ice in the veins of every person in that room. Mallory didn't wait. He removed his gloves, yanked down his mask. "Get me Father Gabriel," he said. "Now." "Sir." "The chaplain?" the nurse asked, bewildered. "Why would?" "I said call the priest." Silence. No one questioned him again, because everyone in that room had seen something they couldn't explain. Paralyzed boy had moved. A sedated child had spoken fluent Latin. And in that moment, with the electric smell of blood and antiseptic thick in the air, science had quietly stepped aside, and something ancient, something unseen, had taken its place. This wasn't just surgery anymore. Something else had just walked into the OR, and it hadn't knocked. Before the whispers, before the hospital gowns and cold scan rooms, before the word paralysis became a permanent resident in their vocabulary, Lucas Grant was just a boy. An extraordinary boy, yes, but ordinary in the way all bright children are before something breaks the world open. He had this wild, untamable mop of sandy brown hair, and a smile that could disarm even the most stone-faced teacher. He loved dinosaurs and astronomy, once insisting he'd discovered a new constellation, just 2 stars and a smudge he called the Warrior's Tear. He was endlessly curious, the kind of kid who'd take apart a remote just to understand why the buttons worked, and then somehow put it back together better than before. He was a runner, climber, a chaser of birds and dreams. At 12 years old, Lucas Grant was full of life. And then he wasn't. It happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day where everything feels sluggish and waterlogged, where shadows stretch longer than they should. Lucas had stayed late after school to help his science teacher clean up a chemistry experiment gone wrong. When his mother, Rachel Grant, arrived 10 minutes past the usual pickup time. She found a group of teachers standing by the school entrance, faces pale, expressions unreadable. Lucas had been found lying motionless in the school hallway. No blood, no head trauma, no signs of a fall. Just him, sprawled flat on the tile floor as if he'd fainted. Only when he woke up, he couldn't feel his legs. He said he'd heard something right before it happened. A whisper. A voice from behind the janitor's closet door that said, "Come see." The tests began. CT scans, MRIs, EMGs, lumbar punctures, neurospecialists in 3 cities. But the results all echoed the same baffling refrain. Nothing is physically wrong with his spine. No severed nerves. No tumors. No spinal cord damage. Medically, Lucas was whole. Neurologically, he was broken. They labeled it functional neurological symptom disorder. The kind of diagnosis that made Rachel feel like the doctors were blaming her son for his own condition, as if he had chosen to forget how to walk. But Lucas didn't want attention. He didn't want sympathy. He wanted his legs back. And he wanted the nightmares to stop. They began a week after the incident. Dark, twisted dreams that would send him bolting upright in bed, drenched in sweat, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting something to still be there. He began to talk in his sleep. At first, it was simple phrases. "He's here again." Then came the strange ones. "The man in the fog. Don't open the red door. He walks like he's broken, but he's not." Once, he woke up screaming, his hands clawing at his legs, yelling, "They're pulling me back in." Rachel started sleeping on the floor beside his bed, afraid of what he might do in the middle of the night, or what might be done to him. She took him to therapists, psychiatrists. Lucas was cooperative, honest, but none of it helped. Then he began drawing. Not the whimsical sketches he once adored. No cartoons or dragons or rocket ships. These were grim, intricate symbols. Circles within circles. Doors surrounded by eyes. And always, fog. Gray clouds swallowing everything whole. One day, Rachel found a page under his pillow. It was a crude drawing of their house. But every window was boarded shut, and the front door was painted blood red. Over it, he had written in block letters, "It's coming through." Rachel had always considered herself strong. She raised Lucas alone since he was 2, working 2 jobs, studying late at night to finish nursing school. She had dealt with broken heaters, overdue rent, food stamps, and judgmental glances. But this was the first time she felt truly powerless. Because the boy who once danced in the kitchen and chased butterflies was now a prisoner in a wheelchair. Trapped in a world where science had no answers, and sleep had become a battleground. And some nights, when Lucas would speak in strange tongues with his eyes still shut, Rachel would feel a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. Somewhere deep inside, she knew, whatever had taken her son's legs, it wasn't finished yet. And it wasn't something that could be treated with medicine. It wanted something, and it had only just begun. By the time Dr. Ethan Mallory reviewed Lucas Grant's case file, the boy had already become an enigma wrapped in white linen and clinical silence. 13 neurologists, 4 pediatric psychiatrists, 1 shaman, uninvited by the hospital, but insisted upon by a desperate aunt. And still no answers. Lucas had undergone 9 months of failed treatments. Corticosteroids, nerve stimulation therapy, psychiatric observation, experimental neurorewiring trials, and even intensive trauma-informed hypnosis. Nothing worked. Nothing even cracked the surface. His legs remained motionless. His dreams grew darker. Rachel, now thinner and quieter, looked older than her years when she pushed his wheelchair into Dr. Mallory's private consultation room at St. Augustine's Pediatric Neurology Institute. Mallory, a man of sharp suits, sharper wit, and a reputation for solving hopeless cases, was not easily impressed by mystery. He was a disciple of hard science, of cold data. His office had no family photos, no religious icons, no clutter, only polished steel, framed medical degrees, and a brain model with each lobe perfectly color-coded. He'd cured children where others failed. He'd removed tumors wrapped around the spinal cord like vines choking a tree. He'd mapped the labyrinth of nerves as if he had lived inside the human nervous system himself. But even he wasn't prepared for Lucas Grant. On paper, Lucas was simply complicated. His scans showed no visible trauma, yet his legs had not responded to stimuli in nearly a year. Every medical test came back whispering the same eerie tune. Nothing is physically wrong with this child. But then one scan stood out. A new 3D-enhanced MRI, taken just days before Rachel brought him in, revealed something faint near the lower thoracic spinal cord. A lesion almost imperceptible. Not a tumor. Not a cyst. It pulsed subtly with the rhythm of his blood flow. It wasn't supposed to be there. Mallory examined it for hours. The lesion didn't behave like any neural or vascular abnormality he'd ever seen. It didn't interfere with the spinal cord directly, yet every symptom pointed to that precise location. Worse, it seemed to move ever so slightly between scans, shifting like it didn't want to be found. Still, Mallory chalked it up to an anomaly. Science always has a reason, he told himself. You just have to dig deep enough. He scheduled Lucas for exploratory spinal surgery in 10 days. And then things turned strange. Lucas had been placed under observation in the pediatric ward, monitored round the clock to prepare him physically and psychologically for the surgery. He was sedated lightly to ease his night terrors and kept in a room with cameras due to his previous self-harm attempts while sleepwalking. That's when the drawings began. First, a nurse found a page torn from a coloring book. Lucas had scribbled spirals inside spirals, like tunnels collapsing into themselves. Then came more, hidden under his sheets, scrawled faintly on the underside of his wheelchair, etched with fingernails into the soft vinyl padding of his bed. These were not childlike doodles. They were precise, geometric, sinister. One nurse noticed that several of the symbols mirrored ancient alchemical markings. Another, a hobbyist historian, swore she recognized one as a glyph used in 15th-century exorcism rites in Eastern Europe. Mallory, ever the skeptic, dismissed it at first. Subconscious imagery. The mind clings to what it can't explain. But then came the night where Lucas, fully sedated with 4-lorazepam and under muscle relaxants, sat upright at 3:12 a.m. The monitor didn't alarm. The EEG didn't spike. But the camera caught it. Lucas opened his eyes, stared directly into the lens, and began to draw with his finger in the air. When the nurse replayed the footage in slow motion the next morning, the shape became clear. It was the same sigil Rachel had once found hidden in his pillowcase months earlier. The one Lucas didn't remember drawing. The one Father Gabriel would later identify as a seal used to bind watchers. Mallory watched the footage 3 times, then once more alone. He finally spoke. That's not possible. From that day forward, Mallory began to monitor Lucas personally. He reviewed brainwave patterns, consulted obscure neurological journals, even called in a colleague from Prague with a background in neurotheology, the study of brain activity in religious experiences. What disturbed him most wasn't what they found. It was what they didn't. Lucas's prefrontal cortex, responsible for abstract thinking and symbolic reasoning, lit up only during deep sedation. He shouldn't have been capable of coherent thought. Yet the symbols kept coming. And Lucas? He started speaking words he had no way of knowing. One day, during routine vitals, he turned to the attending nurse and whispered, "The lesion is a lock. You're trying to cut open a door." The nurse dropped her chart. Rachel wept that night, not because of fear, but because for the first time in months, Lucas had stood, if only for a moment, inside her dreams. He had stood and walked toward something. Mallory now faced an impossible choice: proceed with the surgery and risk opening something far beyond biology, or back away and let the boy remain a prisoner of paralysis, of secrets, of something that didn't belong in any medical journal. The human body was a mystery, yes, but this was something else, something much older, and far more dangerous. It was just past 6:47 a.m. when the surgical team wheeled Lucas Grant into Operating Room 3 at St. Augustine's Pediatric Neurology Institute. The room was unusually quiet for a procedure of such significance. No casual jokes among the staff. Only silence, the kind that hummed just below the noise of machines, broken only by the faint hiss of oxygen lines and the gentle squeak of wheels on tile. Everyone was watching Lucas. He looked so small on the operating table. Thin arms at his sides, for line threaded into the crook of his elbow. Chest rising and falling in a calm, mechanical rhythm. The monitors blinked steadily, painting a picture of stability. But everyone, from the anesthesiologist to the tech checking the defibrillator pads, felt the same thing: pressure. Like the air in the room was heavier than it should be. Even the seasoned scrub nurse, Linda Hale, who had assisted in hundreds of spinal operations, kept glancing at the overhead lights as if expecting them to go out at any moment. Dr. Ethan Mallory entered precisely on time, suited in surgical blue and a focused expression carved from years of elite training and high-stakes operations. He didn't believe in superstition. He didn't flinch at anomalies. This boy, whatever else he might be, had a lesion Mallory had identified, and he intended to fix it. "Vitals?" he asked. "Stable," replied Dr. Klein from the head of the bed. "BP 118/74. Heart rate 82. Anesthesia is holding steady. He's fully under." Mallory nodded. "Then let's begin." The first incision was clean, precise, measured. The team worked in practice silence, exposing the lower thoracic region of Lucas's spine. It was delicate work, the kind where 1 millimeter could change a life forever. Mallory's hands were steady, guided by years of surgical memory and a mind that calculated risk like a machine. But then, Lucas's heart rate spiked. The monitor shrieked a warning as the numbers jumped erratically. "Heart rate 136, Dr. Klein called out. Respirations increased. "Too soon for him to be metabolizing the sedation," the anesthetist muttered, already adjusting the dosage. "This doesn't make sense." Linda looked up from the field. "Sir, his leg." Mallory turned his eyes downward. Lucas's left leg twitched, then the right. Not a tremor, not a reflex, a coordinated movement, like someone shifting beneath a heavy blanket. "That's impossible," Mallory said under his breath. "He's paralyzed. No muscle stimulation," the surgical tech added, bewildered. And then, Lucas's lips moved. Everyone in the room froze. Mallory leaned over, heart hammering behind his ribs. The boy's eyes remained shut, his body still sedated. But his mouth moved again, soft, deliberate, whispering. And this time they heard it. "Non habit. Expectat." The Latin drifted into the air like a curse torn from ancient stone. Dr. Klein blinked. "Did he just?" Mallory pulled off his magnifying visor. "What did he say?" I think it was Latin," Klein whispered, visibly rattled. "Non habit. Expectat." Linda, pale now, repeated the words slowly. "He is not gone. He waits." Then came the chaos. The overhead surgical lights flickered, a rapid stutter of white before dimming ominously. The ECG monitor glitched, lines skittering before snapping back. The ventilator coughed. Then the screen went black for 3 full seconds. The once sterile, predictable, now felt alive, breathing, watching. Something had entered, and it was not welcome. Mallory stood frozen, staring at the boy who moments ago couldn't feel his legs, now whispering in ancient tongues with a lesion pulsing like a second heartbeat. "No," he muttered. "No, this isn't right. Something's wrong." Lucas's back arched ever so slightly, a gasp escaping his mouth. The vitals held, but the tension in the room was spiraling. One nurse backed away entirely, her gloved hands trembling. Then Lucas spoke again. "He waits beneath." The lights dimmed to half power and held. Dr. Mallory finally snapped. "Call Father Gabriel," he barked. "Now." Dr. Klein turned to him, stunned. "Ethan, we can't just—" "I don't care what protocol says," Mallory shouted. "Call him. Now." A hush fell. The surgeon, the rationalist, the man of pure science, had just called for a priest in the middle of an active operating theater. No one argued. Not after what they had seen. The surgery was halted. Lucas was stabilized and sedated deeper. But even as the room was prepped for suspension and post-op review, the boy's lips continued to move. Unheard. Unreadable. Only the camera above the surgical table caught what he said next. Hours later, when the footage was reviewed frame by frame, a single phrase could be read in the movement of his mouth. "He's inside the cut." Mallory stepped out of the OR that day not with triumph, but with a question that no textbook could answer. What happens when a surgeon cuts open more than just flesh? What happens when a scalpel finds the edge of something immaterial? He no longer doubted that they had awoken something. The only question now was what it wanted. When Father Gabriel Rousseau arrived at St. Augustine's Pediatric Neurology Institute, he walked through the front doors like a man who had visited the battlefield too many times to fear its smoke. He wasn't like the other priests Rachel had met. He wore no delicate silver cross, no soft linen robe or meek smile. Father Gabriel was cut from harder cloth. Beneath his clerical collar and neatly pressed coat, there was a gravity to him, a quiet weight that followed him into every room. His eyes were steel gray, sharp and probing, with the kind of stare that made liars falter and truth tremble on the tongue. He had once been a military chaplain in war-torn Central Africa. He'd walked through refugee camps where mothers wept blood, and he'd whispered last rites to children whose eyes were still open. But in whispers behind Vatican walls, and in the margins of official church documents, Father Gabriel was best known for one thing: spiritual warfare. He had stood where the veil thinned. He had seen the other side blink first. When Dr. Mallory met him at the hospital entrance, he looked almost sheepish, suddenly aware of how ridiculous it must sound to call for a priest mid-surgery. But Gabriel wasn't one to judge. "You saw what you saw," he said plainly, as if confirming the surgeon's unspoken guilt. Mallory only nodded. "Is the boy conscious?" "Yes. Awake. Responsive. Doesn't remember anything." "Good," Gabriel replied. "Then let's see if his soul is still the one he was born with." Lucas's room was silent when they entered. Sunlight filtered weakly through the blinds, striping the walls like prison bars. The boy sat propped up in bed, pale but calm, flipping through a sketchbook Rachel had brought from home. He looked up as the door opened, blinking like someone just pulled him from underwater. "Lucas," Mallory said gently. "This is Father Gabriel. He's here to talk to you." Lucas nodded politely, his voice barely a whisper. Gabriel smiled with only half his mouth. "Hi, son." He took a chair beside the bed, resting a small leather satchel on his lap. "Mind if we talk for a bit?" Lucas glanced at Rachel, who nodded. "Okay." The priest leaned in. "Do you remember anything about the surgery?" he asked. Lucas blinked slowly. "I was dreaming, I think. It was really dark. But I don't remember anything after they put the mask on my face." "You said some things, Lucas," Mallory added. "Strange things. Do you remember speaking Latin?" The boy shook his head. "I don't know Latin." That much was true, he'd barely passed Spanish. Gabriel studied him in silence for a few moments longer, then gestured to the sketchpad in Lucas's lap. "May I see what you're drawing?" Lucas hesitated, then turned the page and handed it over. It was a symbol, not a monster, not a house or a sun. A complex sigil, drawn with geometric precision far beyond a child's capability. It resembled a circle within a triangle, with lines intersecting at 6 points, almost like an occult compass. Around its outer rim, small arcane symbols dotted the space between larger glyphs, teeth, eyes, and wings, all joined in disturbing symmetry. Father Gabriel froze. His jaw clenched. His knuckles went white on the edge of the page. He had seen this before, not in art, not in scripture, but in the restricted archives of the Vatican, the kind of texts that never made it into seminaries or Sunday services. It was a sigil, one of the forbidden seals, known as the clavicula umbri, the shadow key, used in ancient exorcisms, but outlawed by the church centuries ago because of its tendency to invite more than it expelled. It wasn't meant to be drawn, and certainly not remembered. Yet here it was, sketched in ballpoint by a paralyzed boy with no memory of doing so. Gabriel cleared his throat and carefully folded the page back. "Where did you see this, Lucas?" he asked, tone low. The boy frowned thoughtfully. "I don't know. I just see it sometimes. In my dreams." "What kind of dreams?" Lucas looked at him, and his voice went even quieter. "There's a door, but it's not real. It's in the sky but also underground. And something's always behind it, watching, like it's waiting for me to open it." "Have you opened it?" Lucas shook his head. "Not yet." Father Gabriel stood and turned to Mallory and Rachel. "Whatever this is," he said gravely, "it didn't start in the oar. It didn't start in his spine. It's been following him for a long time, maybe since birth, maybe before." Rachel's hand flew to her mouth. Mallory looked stunned. Gabriel walked to the window and pulled the blinds shut. Then he turned back, his face shadowed and serious. "This symbol is not just a warning. It's a summoning mark, a spiritual frequency. Something is using your son as an antenna, drawing something through him." Rachel stepped back like she'd been slapped. "Then what do we do?" Mallory asked. Gabriel unzipped his satchel and pulled out a weathered book, bound in black leather and sealed with a red wax emblem. "We prepare for containment. If what's using him breaks through again, it won't stop with his legs." He looked down at the boy, whose eyes were now heavy with fatigue. "It will want his voice, then his mind, then whatever's left." For weeks, Rachel had stood silent on the sidelines of chaos, watching her son unravel piece by piece under the cold glare of hospital lights. His legs useless, his nights haunted. She had cried. She had prayed. She had screamed in private bathrooms and begged God, medicine, and strangers for mercy. But she had not spoken the one truth that might have made any of it make sense. Until now. It was a rainy Sunday when she finally cracked. The rain fell like a whisper against the hospital windows, blurring the city skyline into a watercolor of grays. Lucas was asleep again, sedated under Father Gabriel's strict orders while the spiritual investigation continued. His latest drawings had been collected, sealed in an envelope marked, "Do not open." The sigils were growing more intricate, more aware. Dr. Mallory and Father Gabriel stood in a small staff lounge down the hall, drinking lukewarm coffee and reviewing the latest neuroscans, scans that made less sense every day. And then, Rachel appeared in the doorway, soaked from her shoulders down, her eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice didn't waver, cracked like glass. They gathered in Mallory's office. Rachel sat down slowly, clutching a damp manila folder in her lap. Her fingers trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of the secret she had carried for over a decade. "I should have said something sooner," she began, eyes fixed on the floor. "But I thought I could keep it buried. That if I just loved him enough, if I gave him a normal life, none of it would matter." Mallory leaned forward. "Rachel, what are you saying?" She opened the folder and pulled out a birth certificate. The name Lucas Andrei Petrov, the country of origin, Romania. "My son," she said slowly, "is adopted." The room stilled. Rachel continued, her voice low, as if speaking too loudly might make the past come alive again. "I adopted him when he was 2 years old. I was doing humanitarian nursing work in eastern Romania after a series of floods displaced hundreds of families. We were visiting a remote village outside Cluj, the kind that didn't show up on GPS. There was a fire," she said. "A church. At least that's what they called it. But it wasn't like any church I'd ever seen. No cross. No altar. Just a circle of stone with carved symbols. And in the middle there were 6 bodies." She swallowed hard. Police said it was a ritual gone wrong. Locals called them Umber, the shadows, a group of mystics obsessed with ancient deities and forgotten rites. They believed in opening doors between worlds, literal rifts between dimensions. "And Lucas," Gabriel asked gently. He was found in the center of the circle. Alive. Naked. Not a scratch on him. Her voice cracked again. His birth parents were part of the group. They were among the dead. Gabriel's face had turned to stone. The child was the vessel. I don't know what that means, Rachel snapped, her guilt suddenly igniting into self-defense. He was just a baby, covered in soot. His eyes were open but empty. Mallory leaned back, processing every word like a cold needle to the brain. And you adopted him. I couldn't leave him there, Rachel said, tears now rolling freely. They said no one would take him, that no family in the village wanted him. Some thought he was cursed, but he was just a baby, damn it. So I took him. I brought him home. She looked at them both. We changed his name. I raised him as my own. And for 12 years he was normal. Bright, sweet, a little odd maybe, but never this. Gabriel stepped forward slowly. Did he ever ask about his past? Never. I told him he was mine from the beginning. I thought the past died with those people in that circle. I didn't think, she broke off, shaking. I didn't think it would ever follow him here. Mallory stood up, rubbing the back of his neck, his medical mind spinning but finding no grip. So you thought love would be enough to erase what was inside him? Yes, she whispered. And now, she looked up. Now I think I was wrong. Father Gabriel walked to the window, staring out into the storm as if the clouds were whispering secrets he had almost forgotten. His voice was grave when he spoke. They didn't succeed in their ritual, but they didn't fail either. They left a crack. Something got through, and they left it inside the boy. Mallory turned to Rachel, his voice measured but urgent. You said they were trying to open a door. Rachel nodded. And Lucas, he keeps talking about a door. In his dreams. In the symbols. Not just any door, Gabriel added. The kind that shouldn't exist. The kind that leads nowhere, but lets things in anyway. He turned, his eyes sharp. We need to close it. Rachel finally collapsed into tears, not from fear, but from the soul-crushing realization that the one thing she had never told her son might be the very thing that was destroying him. Love hadn't been enough, because some legacies don't die in fire. Some are carried silently in blood. At first, they thought it was a miracle. 3 days after the surgery, the impossible one that shouldn't have yielded any results, Lucas walked. Not stumbled. Not limped. Walked. It was Dr. Mallory himself who witnessed it. He had come in early that morning, half asleep and halfway through a bitter coffee, only to find Lucas out of bed, standing barefoot on the cold tile floor. The machines hooked to his body beeped in protest as wires dangled uselessly from his chest. Lucas, Mallory asked, stepping into the room. The boy turned slowly. His movement was measured, precise, as if every step were calculated not by muscle memory, but by design. There was no elation on his face, no boyish grin of victory, only a quiet stillness. His eyes, those eyes, locked onto Mallory's. It's starting, Lucas said, and then he calmly walked back to the bed and sat down. Word spread fast. Nurses whispered in break rooms. Orderlies passed it around like a ghost story. The paralyzed boy who got up and walked. Mallory tried to make sense of it with a barrage of MRIs, reflex tests, and neurological assessments, but none of the scans explained the return of motor function. In fact, the results were even stranger now. Some scans showed more damage than before. Others looked like they'd been taken from 2 different people. And then the predictions started. It began innocuously enough. A nurse brought Lucas lunch. As she adjusted his tray, he looked up and said, Your dog got out again. Check behind the neighbor's shed. She froze. What? His name is Marley. He's fine, but he's chewing on that red garden hose. She ran home during her break. Marley was exactly where Lucas said he'd be. Then came the night shift incident. An intern named Jaden was charting vitals when Lucas stirred. Without opening his eyes, he whispered, Your grandmother forgives you. Jaden dropped the tablet. What did you say? She knows it wasn't your fault. The storm. The accident. She says she forgives you, and you can stop keeping her picture in your sock drawer. Jaden stood frozen, mouth open. He did keep a photo of his grandmother there. No one knew that. No one could have known. Jaden took a leave of absence the next morning. By the end of the week, the boys' room had become a rotating shrine of uneasy professionals. Nurses reluctant to make eye contact. Doctors insisting on working in pairs. The hospital board tried to keep things quiet, but rumors outpaced policy. Lucas didn't just walk. He saw. Not with his eyes, but with something else. Something deeper. Names, memories, regrets, losses. He plucked them from the air like radio signals. Even Father Gabriel began to keep his visits brief. Then came Nurse Eliza. She had been working pediatrics for 15 years. A no-nonsense, seen-it-all woman who didn't scare easily. When she volunteered to do Lucas's evening rounds, she went in with the confidence of someone unimpressed by whispers. 10 minutes later, she walked out white as a sheet. When pressed, all she would say was, "His eyes, they changed." Mid-sentence. Like something else was looking out of them. She submitted her resignation before midnight. She didn't come back to pick up her last paycheck. Lucas's episodes became more frequent. He no longer slept normally. Instead, he would lie awake for hours, eyes open but unmoving, as if watching something just beyond the veil. His sketches returned, darker now, jagged, spiraling. He no longer spoke casually. When he did speak, it was often in riddles or chilling observations. "The man in 3B will be gone by sunrise," he said once. And sure enough, the elderly stroke patient in room 3B passed during the early morning rounds. Another time, Lucas muttered, "Blood in the walls. Not yet, but soon." Security footage from that night showed nothing. But the next morning, the wallpaper in the east stairwell peeled back to reveal a long smear of rust-colored fluid embedded in the plaster. No source. No leak. Just there. Mallory, ever the scientist, wanted to believe there was a rational explanation, some post-surgical neuroplasticity, maybe undiagnosed savant syndrome. But even he was beginning to question whether this was biology at all. Father Gabriel had no such illusions. "He's becoming a conduit," the priest said. "Something is using him, speaking through him." "Then what the hell was the surgery?" Mallory asked. Gabriel shook his head. "It wasn't healing. It was an unlocking." Rachel refused to leave her son's side. She stayed every night, praying silently, reading psalms aloud even when Lucas showed no response. But even she began to notice the subtle changes. The way his eyes lingered a second too long. The way the air felt heavier in the room. The way the light seemed to dim just slightly when Lucas exhaled. She reached out to touch his forehead one night, and he flinched. Not like a scared boy, but like something inside him had just noticed her. By the end of the second week, the hospital administration was quietly requesting Lucas be moved to an off-site care facility. But Father Gabriel had other plans. "We need to act now," he said grimly. Before the door he sees opens. Dr. Adrian Mallory had been called many things in his career. A genius, a renegade, a miracle worker, but never a coward. So when he found himself standing outside the hospital chapel, sweat gathering at the base of his spine, hands shaking just slightly, he knew something was wrong. Not physically. Not in the way that a surgeon measures wrongness, broken tissue, abnormal vitals, a missed incision. No, this was spiritual wrongness, and it sat on his chest like a lead weight. Inside, Father Gabriel was waiting. The priest had requested a private meeting. Off the books. Mallory hadn't expected the tone to be so grave, or the stakes so high. They sat across from each other in the silence of the hospital chapel, lit only by weak overhead fluorescence and the flickering sanctuary candle. The smell of old wood and incense clung to the air. Father Gabriel wasted no time. "You've seen it yourself, Adrian. The walking, the visions, the voice that's not his." Mallory leaned back, crossing his arms. "Yes, and I've also seen frontal lobe anomalies, trauma-induced hallucinations, brain plasticity. Lucas could be an outlier, a medical marvel. Gabriel shook his head. This isn't science anymore. This is scripture. Mallory's laugh was short, bitter. You want me to just throw out every tool I've trained with and jump on your wagon because a kid said something creepy and a nurse quit her job? The priest stood slowly and walked to the altar, placing both hands on it. When I first became a priest, I thought exorcism was a cinematic exaggeration, superstition with good PR. But over the years, I've seen things. Just a few, mind you, but enough to know when a soul is not alone. He turned to face Mallory. Lucas is not alone, doctor. Not since that surgery. You unlocked something in him, and it's trying to anchor itself. Mallory remained silent. Father Gabriel softened his voice. You're not a coward. I know that. But you are standing at a crossroads. If you go public with this, you'll be devoured. The media will turn this into a circus. Your peers will write you off as delusional. The hospital board will terminate you before your first interview. You'll lose everything. Mallory exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the pew. And the other road? He asked. Gabriel looked him dead in the eye. We do it quietly. Tonight. Just the three of us. You, me, and Rachel. We try to sever the tie, the tether, before it roots itself deeper. Before it becomes impossible. Mallory didn't respond right away. He stared at the chapel's crucifix, the shadows dancing behind it. He thought of Lucas's spine on the MRI screen. Deformed, calcified, impossible. He thought of that same boy walking across a hospital room days later like nothing had ever been wrong. He thought of the names, the secrets, the darkness in the boy's voice. And then he thought of Rachel. What mother deserves to choose between love and fear? What surgeon deserves to choose between science and belief? Mallory stood. We do it tonight. Don't. This is not cardiac. And still the boy convulsed until suddenly he stilled. Completely. Silence. Then his voice returned. Soft now. Pitiful even. Mom? Rachel lunged forward. Lucas. His eyes were normal again. Wet with tears. Terrified. Why is everything so loud? Why can I hear the lights? Father Gabriel slowly stepped back. It's not over, he said. But the door's been closed. For now. Mallory collapsed into the nearest chair. The monitors stabilized. The air lightened. The temperature rose back to normal. It was over. Or so they hoped. The chapel at St. Dymphna's wasn't built for this. It had seen grief, yes. Grief poured out into empty pews, whispered into clasped hands, soaked into the altar rail. But not this. Not the flickering presence of a thing older than language. Not a boy twitching like a marionette in the dark. But that night, the hospital's heart became its battleground. It was 2:12 a.m. when the doors of the chapel creaked open. Dr. Mallory wheeled Lucas in alone. The boy sat eerily still, his hands folded on his lap like an obedient altar boy. Rachel followed behind, clutching a rosary she hadn't touched in decades. Father Gabriel was already there, lighting candles one by one. 12 in total, positioned in a rough circle around the altar. Mallory's mind screamed for him to stop. His surgical training hissed in protest. This is madness. This is theater. This is not medicine. But something deeper within, older perhaps, kept his hands steady. Lucas remained silent. Too silent. As Gabriel closed the chapel doors behind them, he murmured the words, "Once we begin, we do not stop." The ritual began with prayer. Not shouting. Not dramatic chants. Just Latin muttered quietly over the faint crackle of flame. At first, Lucas didn't react. His head bowed, his face peaceful. Mallory allowed himself to hope. But then came the shift. It started with a twitch in the boy's jaw. Then a low hum barely audible. Then his hands clenched and his back arched violently, almost breaking the leather straps that held him to the chair. "I don't want to," he whispered in a voice that was not his own. Then, in another voice, overlapping the first, "You can't make us." And then another, and another. Each one spoke with a different tone, accent, Rhythm male, female, childlike, ancient. The air quivered. Father Gabriel didn't flinch. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti, Lucas shrieked. The candles flared, then in unison blew out. No draft, no wind, just extinguished, as though snuffed by invisible fingers. The chapel plunged into darkness. But the voices kept going. Some mocked, some begged, some wept, some recited facts no one in the room had ever spoken aloud. Gabriel's mother's last words, Rachel's secret vow at her husband's grave, Mallory's trembling confession whispered into a dorm room wall 2 decades ago. It knew everything. Rachel trembled. Is he still in there? My son Lucas. Is he still there? Father Gabriel paused in his prayer. Then he answered, not to her but to the boy. Lucas, if you hear me, blink once. The voices laughed. They howled. But Lucas's eyes fluttered. Just once. Gabriel pressed on. The rite reached its climax. He drew the sign of the cross with holy water on Lucas's forehead. And for a moment, everything stopped. No voices, no screaming, no sound at all. Then Lucas's body launched forward in a full spasm. The wheelchair screeched against the stone floor. His eyes rolled so far back that only white remained. He let out a guttural growl, a sound no child should ever make. And then, silence. Lucas collapsed. Head slumped forward. Limbs limp. No pulse. Mallory's training overtook him. He lunged forward, fingers to the neck, checking for signs of life. Nothing. He reached for the defibrillator. Wait, Gabriel said. Mallory froze. He's crashing. Wait. Then, Lucas's eyelids fluttered. He took a long, deep breath, like someone waking from a dream. Then he looked up at them all and said, in his own voice, Mom. Rachel dropped to her knees, sobbing. Mallory looked at the monitors. His vitals were perfect. Heart rate stable. Oxygen saturation optimal. Skin color returned.
No tremors. No sweating.
Just peace. Lucas smiled. Not a creepy smile. Not a forced one. But a child's smile. Real. Soft. Fragile. It was the first smile he had shown in weeks. He looked around. Why are we in church? No trace of the other voices. No memory of the event. Just confusion and calm. Father Gabriel stepped back, sweat pouring down his temple, eyes closed in silent gratitude. The candles relit on their own. One by one. There are things that medicine cannot explain. Moments that slip between neurons and pulses and charts. And that night, in a chapel built for grief but baptized in war, a boy returned to himself. But as Mallory watched him, so calm, so normal, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had only just begun. St. Dymphna's stood still for weeks. Whispers lingered, passed from nurse to nurse, hushed in elevators, scribbled half-jokingly in the break room's forgotten coffee logs. But officially, nothing happened. No incident was logged. No patient file was flagged. No report was submitted. Lucas was discharged 2 days later. Walked out the front door holding Rachel's hand. His own legs carrying him unassisted, as if the last 7 years of paralysis had been no more than a prolonged bad dream. He didn't need a walker. He didn't stumble. He even skipped on the curb, laughing when a pigeon startled him. The boy the staff had once feared became the miracle no one could explain. Rachel took him home to the quiet hills outside the city, where their cottage waited with wildflowers clinging to the windows and dust dancing in morning light. She redecorated his room. Soft yellows, calming blues, no symbols, no old toys, just peace. And Lucas? He slept, ate, grew, played. No voices, no more strange predictions, no more knowing things he shouldn't. No mention of the surgery or the chapel. Just a child again. Dr. Mallory, however, was never the same. He filed for retirement not long after Lucas's release. Claimed he wanted more time with family, though no one had ever seen him with anyone outside of work. Packed his office in silence. Refused interviews. declined a farewell party. They found a small wooden crucifix tucked in his desk drawer, stained from the oils of his hands. He never mentioned where he got it. He moved out of state within a week. No forwarding address. But it was Father Gabriel who gave the final warning. One late afternoon, as Rachel watered the garden while Lucas drew with chalk on the driveway, the priest arrived. No collar, no Bible, just a man who had seen too much, standing at the gate with a look that betrayed no joy despite the good news. Rachel offered him tea. He declined. They stood in the shadow of the porch, the sun sinking behind them like a warning. "You understand this wasn't gone," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the house. She said nothing. The ritual didn't erase it. It forced it out, pushed it back. Rachel swallowed. "You said the door was closed." He nodded solemnly. "Yes, closed, but not locked." And with that he turned and walked away. Life resumed. Mostly. Lucas enrolled in a new school under a new name. Rachel burned the old documents. She even considered moving countries again, but Lucas begged to stay. He liked the trees. He liked the quiet. He liked being normal. And for a while he was, until one night. It was around 2:03 a.m. when Rachel woke to the sound of soft footsteps. She got up, heart calm at first, probably Lucas needing water. Maybe a bad dream. But as she reached his room, her heart sank. Lucas wasn't in bed. She found him downstairs, in the dark, barefoot, in front of the fireplace, drawing, not with crayons, not on paper, with chalk, on the hardwood floor, lines, curves, geometric intersections, the same sigil, the exact one, from the hospital, from the chapel, from the surgery notes she had once found and burned. His eyes were closed. He was sleepwalking, murmuring, not in English, not in any language she recognized. The room felt colder. She stepped forward, slowly. "Lucas!" He paused mid-stroke, head still bowed, fingers frozen in place. Then, very quietly, he said, "It's almost open again." Rachel screamed, shook him. He blinked awake. "Mom!" He looked confused, innocent, small. "What's wrong?" She wrapped her arms around him, trembling. "Nothing, baby. Nothing at all." She wiped away the chalk, threw it in the fireplace, sat beside him till morning, holding him like a shield against the dark. As the house sleeps, the baby monitor in Lucas's room flickers to life, though he's long outgrown needing it. The grainy night vision feed shows him sitting upright in bed, eyes wide open, whispering in a voice that is not his own. "It's still here, and it knows your name."